what's up? Today, I'm gonna tell you guys about 6 pantry items that I think are worth splurging on. And then at the end of the video, I'll tell you about a few that I think you might be wasting your money on. And if you're wondering, who is this guy and why should I give a crap about what he thinks? I'm Brian, and I used to be a chef in fancy restaurants. I was a bread baker and also a chef consultant. And one thing that I learned in all of that time in the kitchen is when a high quality ingredient really makes a difference in the final dish and when it doesn't really matter. So let's get started. The first pantry item that I think is worth splurging on is dried beans. I'm sure most of you guys, like me, have had a really hard time getting standard issue grocery store dried beans cooked properly. That's because most of the dried beans that are available at the grocery store, especially the cheap ones, were dried and harvested many months ago, or possibly even years ago. And that makes rehydrating them with cooking almost impossible. Now, a few years ago when I was working in the restaurant, I came across a brand called Rancho Gordo. They're really high quality heirloom fresh dried beans. A fresh dried bean is just a bean that's been dried pretty recently and not 2 or 3 years ago. And it's really hard for me to stress the difference in eating experience between a crappy cheap bean and a properly cooked high quality dried bean. The cheap beans are somehow under and overcooked at the same time and lack any meaningful bean flavor. The really nice heirloom beans here have a delicious snap to the outer skin and an unbelievable creaminess throughout. Plus, the flavor, as you can imagine, is really intense. Super beany. The cost difference between these two products is somewhere in the ballpark of like 300%. These cheap beans are about $2 a bag, and these nice Rancho Gordos are about $7 to $9 a bag for the same quantity. Again, that's like 3 times more expensive, but these are at least 3 times as pleasurable to eat. I'll often buy a big box of these Rancho Gordos at once to kind of spread out that shipping cost over a dozen bags instead of just buying one at a time. But if shipping cost is something you're worried about and you have Amazon Prime, I would say check out a brand called Camellia. These beans are just as good as the Rancho Gordos, but like I said, they can come to you on Amazon. Unfortunately, at this time, I can't really recommend any mass market dried beans that you could just go buy at the grocery store. But if you know of one, please let me know down in the comments so that I can share that information with everybody in the future. And oh yeah, honorable mention, there are also these giant Greek Gigante beans that they sell on Amazon. They're one of the creamiest beans that I've ever eaten, and they are super delicious. They're kind of expensive, but they're worth it. Beans are dope, and I hope you guys start spending some money on nice ones. Now, the next pantry item that I think is worth splurging on is nice canned tomatoes. High quality canned tomatoes are made from, not surprisingly, high quality fresh tomatoes that are ripened in the field, sorted for uniformity and quality, and then minimally processed. Low quality canned tomatoes, on the other hand, are made from the cheaper underripe fruits, and those often require a bunch of additional ingredients like calcium chloride or sugar to hide some of their shortcomings. To clarify, I'll say that cheaper canned tomatoes can be totally fine for something like soup or stew where tomato flavor isn't the main thing that you're going for, but for tomato forward dishes like pasta or pizza, you really shouldn't be caught messing with the cheap stuff. Cheaper tomatoes on average lack acidity, they lack sweetness, and they just don't have the density of flesh that you need to make a great sauce. An A quality good canned tomato should just taste good straight up. Like you should want to eat a spoonful of it and then get another spoonful of it. That's usually my litmus test. As far as specifics go, I don't think it's necessary to have a San Marzano variety in the can for it to be great. Romas are good. Generic plum or pear tomatoes can also be excellent when canned. For me, the biggest factor is, was the fruit ripe when it was put in the can? It's just not possible to turn a vapid, watery, underripe tomato into something compelling, in my opinion. Fellow YouTubist Ethan Chabowski actually did a canned tomato video a few weeks ago with a ton more information. So if you actually want some facts and less Brian's opinion, I will link to that video down in the description. Ideally, you just taste a few brands and find something that you think tastes great, but I'll say be willing to pay at least $4 a can. It's worth it. As far as brands that are available to me that I like, Bianco di Napoli is my favorite. I get these at Whole Foods. Love you. Cento is also a great brand that's available at most grocery stores, and I'll give an honorable mention to Muir Glen. You've probably had those. Now, the third pantry item that I think is worth splurging on is nice fish sauce. Around 2012, a product called Red Boat fish sauce showed up in the restaurant that I was a sous chef in, and the second I tasted it, I was like, whoa, this is an entirely different thing. It was more balanced, more intense, it was fishier in a good way, funkier in a good way, and it was less aggressively salty than the cheap stuff that I was used to. Up until that point, I had been using whatever generic fish sauce that I could find at the Asian food mart, and it was good, but saltiness was the main flavor going on, followed by funky umami. With nice fish sauce, it's the other way around. You get round, beautiful umami up front, followed by a mellow saltiness. Recently, when I was developing a recipe for this channel, pad thai, check that video out down below if you're interested, by the way. I found that using flavor dense fish sauce actually did make a super big difference in terms of the final results. With good fish sauce in pad thai, you get more of that dark caramely flavor and overall a softer, rounder, funky fish flavor. Fish sauce is one of my favorite ingredients of all time, maybe top 5. So I'm inclined to use a version that is a little bit of a higher quality. This bottle costs about $10, whereas the generic cheap stuff costs about $3 to $4. And if you're wondering what makes nice fish sauce, just look at the ingredient label. It should be just anchovies and salt. Cheaper brands will add caramel color, MSG, sugar, and all kinds of other stuff to adulterate the pure flavor of rotten anchovies. I say splurge and spend the extra $6 because you get a ton of extra flavor for not a ton of extra money. Now, the next pantry item that I think is worth splurging on is nice rice. Lauren and I eat rice like 5 days a week in some form or another, whether that's fresh rice for dinner or leftover rice microwaved the next day. And since I started spending money on nice rice, I'm very spoiled and cannot go back to the cheap stuff. Cheap rice generally has broken kernels, the grains themselves are uneven in size, and they cook unevenly. Additionally, low quality rice has a lot of what farmers call chalk in it, meaning the grain was stressed somehow during its growing and is now pocketed with opaque holes that make the rice hard to cook. Premium rice, on the other hand, is super uniform. It lacks excessive starch, meaning that it's usually pre-washed before you buy it, and aesthetically it has a really nice pearly translucence to it. That's from being polished during processing. And of course, the grains are unbroken. Overall, the experience of eating high quality rice is just better. The grains are swollen, but not mushy. They have a really beautiful, chewsome quality to each bite, and it has a fresher, more aromatic flavor. Plus, nutritionally, a lot of premium rice is enriched, meaning that the vitamins and minerals that were washed away in the sifting and polishing process get added back in. And as an added bonus, you also don't need to wash premium rice. Cheap rice is just plain starch. It's gruel. It's like a vehicle for sauce at best. That does have a place though. You could throw some jambalaya or gumbo onto some shitty rice and you're probably gonna be fine. But for me, rice is a leading character in most of the meals that I eat, and I love having the simple pleasure of well-cooked premium rice. Cost-wise, we're really not talking about a huge gap in terms of price. Cheap rice where I live is usually about $2 a bag, whereas this premium sushi rice is about $8 a bag. So, you know, it's 4 times more expensive, but it's not like spending 25 to 40 extra cents per portion is going to change your financial situation. A lot of us happily spend $4 per day on burnt fruit water, so I think you can afford it. Brand wise, I love Botan medium grain rice. I also buy this organic Lundberg Family Farms rice all the time. Jasmine, Sushi, Arborio, all of the stuff that they make is really good. Determining what is premium is actually kind of hard. You're gonna have to look in the bag itself and see if the grains are broken, if they're evenly sized, and if they have any of that chalkiness that I mentioned before. Premium rice usually says premium on the bag, but in this case it says gourmet. That doesn't really mean anything. So just use your eyeballs and some of the stuff that I mentioned and you'll probably end up with something pretty good. If you guys eat a lot of rice like I do, I would say start buying good stuff because it's worth it. Now, before I get to the next pantry item, I want to quickly thank Factor for sponsoring this video. Factor delivers fresh, never frozen, dietitian approved meals to your doorstep. And this is the point where you guys might be wondering, hey Bri, aren't you an unadulterated culinary bad boy? Why are you ordering pre-made meals? Easy. I cook all day and make a bunch of dirty dishes, and then when I make dinner, I make a bunch more dirty dishes. And sometimes, you know, you just want to skip all that. And for me, Factor is always going to be a better option than getting takeout. And a lot of the time it's cheaper and faster than getting takeout. Meals are ready in just about 2 minutes in the microwave or 5 minutes in the oven. I chose the Chef's Choice option this week, and this roasted tomato and chili ground beef with creamy herb green bean dish is amazing. The ground beef is a little bit spicy and a little bit smoky with tender zucchini inside, and there's like creamy, cheesy green beans on the other side. So to save yourself some dishes, head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code Lagerstrom50 to get 50% off your first Factor box. Again, that's Factor75 with code Lagerstrom50 for 50% off. Now, the next pantry item that I think is worth splurging on is bouillon. A lot of you guys will know that I use bouillon all the time on this channel, and that's because a lot of dishes benefit from having a meat and vegetable flavored liquid as their base. but store-bought stock almost always falls short in terms of flavor. At best, you're getting mirepoix flavored water with a whisper of chicken or beef flavor. And seeing as 95% of the people who watch this channel don't have flavorful handmade stock on hand, or they don't have the time to make it before they make a dish, I think using high quality bouillon is a valuable shortcut. High quality bouillon is made from actual animal products and not much else. The brand that I recommend is called Better Than Bouillon, and if you look at the label, it's got roasted beef, garlic, onions, and yeah, there is some food starch and maltodextrin in there, but I'm willing to live with that. Those aren't poisonous. On the other hand, this bouillon cube is basically not food. Look at this label. Chicken is like the 10th thing listed, unfortunately. Also, just like with fish sauce, higher quality bouillon has a ton more flavor and is much less salty. I mean, this stuff still is pretty salty, but it's at a very usable level. By the way, I'm not sponsored by Better Than Bouillon, despite me calling them out by name on the channel all the time. I just haven't found a bouillon product that is as widely available to the home cook and is as useful and delicious. This Better Than Bouillon stuff usually costs me about $10 to $12 per jar, whereas these bouillon cubes are like $1. But for me, 10 to 12 bucks is just not a lot to pay considering this stuff goes a really long way. One jar will get me through over a dozen recipes because you only need to use like 20 to 30 grams at a time. Good bouillon is a great cooking companion and you shouldn't be using the cheap stuff. Now, the last item that I think is super valuable for the home cook in their pantry that they should be using is vinegar. This is aged balsamic here, but I'm talking about all vinegars, guys. Young vins, old vins. You should be spending more than you currently are on them, probably. Seasoning food with acidity is just one of those things that home cooks don't get right most of the time. Whether it's a savory sauce for a beef stew or a simple dressing for a vegetable heavy salad, acid is almost as important as salt in making your food taste good. And unsurprisingly, the quality of the acid that you use makes a very big difference. Cheap vinegar has an acrid flavor, it's stale, it's totally out of balance, and it just tastes bad. I know it seems crazy to say something that is 5% acidity should be in balance, but cheap vinegar is just thin and aggressively sour. That's it. It like burns your mouth. Nice vinegar, on the other hand, whether it's balsamic, red wine, champagne, or cider vinegar, actually tastes good on its own. With wine vinegars, there should be a tannic, fruity quality left over from the wine. With balsamic, there should be a soft, inky sweetness to it. And with apple cider vinegar, there should be a malic acid funkiness and a soft, fruity sweetness left over from the cider. You guys, nice vinegar is like the ultimate supporting character. It can bring a simple vegetable salad from bland to vibrant and a punishingly sweet dish into perfect balance. And you don't need to spend a ton to get great vinegar. This bottle of aged balsamic from Whole Foods was like 13 bucks and I can make, I don't know, 20 salads with it. It goes a very long way. This brand of champagne vinegar is one of my other favorite brands. It's also about $13 a bottle, but will last me many months. Embrace acidity, you guys, and don't look at vinegar as just another thing in your pantry. Avoid cheap, stale, bad tasting vinegar, and trust me, your home cooking will get a lot better. Now for the juicy stuff. Let's talk about all the pantry items that I think are not worth splurging on. The first one is spices. For the most part, all of the spices in my cabinet cost about $2 to $3 per jar. I don't buy organic and I don't buy anything made by a fancy artisan producer. That's not to say that there aren't amazing specialty spices in the world that spending extra money on is super worth it, but for chili powder, paprika, cumin, oregano, chili flakes, coriander, anything like that, I just haven't been convinced that spending extra money is going to bring me any more flavor or any more quality. All of those spices that I mentioned before and a few others like curry powder or garam masala sell in pretty high volumes at the supermarket, and so you can expect that what you see on the shelf is still pretty fresh and should still taste like it's supposed to. I've tasted Aldi chili powder next to Walmart, next to Whole Foods artisan ancho chili powder, and seriously, to me, they all taste pretty much the same. In fact, the things that I use chili powder for the most, like tacos or chili con carne, are actually better with standard issue red boring chili powder. So if you see specialty cumin that's $9 or handmade single origin curry powder, maybe spend that money on some nice beans instead. I'm just not convinced that spending money on spices is worth it. $3 is like the ceiling in terms of quality. Now, the next pantry item that I think you might be wasting your money on is gonna be controversial, but I'm just gonna say it. Olive oil. I know, you're like, Bri, Shouldn't you get the handmade artisan stuff? Well, it just kind of depends on what you're using it for. Personally, in my kitchen, I use olive oil mainly for medium heat cooking, and then 4 to 5 times per week, I'll put a tablespoon or 2 on top of a salad. And in my opinion, for that, you just don't need to use something expensive. And when I say expensive, I mean anything that's more than, say, 40 cents an ounce. I've seen a lot of people use very nice, very expensive olive oil that's like $1 to $2 per ounce, and to me, that's just wasteful. That type of oil is meant to be eaten raw on top of salads or on top of fresh milky cheese, or like to dip super nice bread in. And its spicy, fruity, green flavor that the farmers worked so hard to get is gonna be super muted when you heat it. So I usually keep 1 bottle of Workhorse extra virgin olive oil in the house. That's about 25 to 40 cents an ounce. This 1 quart 34 ounce jar costs me about $8 to $9, and it's more than good enough for drizzling on a salad or dipping bread into, or sizzling off my onions for dinner. Plus, I don't have to feel stingy with it when I'm squeezing in 3 to 4 tablespoons at a time. Okay, the last pantry item that I think you might be wasting your money on is cooking wine. At home, I use boxed wine to cook my food. In a 1 Michelin star restaurant that I worked in, we used boxed wine to cook the food. And in the James Beard award-winning restaurant that I worked in, we used boxed wine to cook the food. Some people will use the phrase, don't cook with it if you wouldn't drink it, and yeah, I think to some extent that's true. Like, if what's in the bottle is barely wine or doesn't taste like wine does, then yeah, definitely don't use that. But for me, I wouldn't and don't drink boxed wine anymore. Let me clarify. Lauren and I used to drink about a box of Boda brand Cabernet wine every single week, but now that I'm a grown-up and I'm extremely sensitive to being hungover, when I do drink wine, I drink handmade wines by reputable producers, usually old world and usually natural. It's kind of annoying, actually. So for me, Boda Box or Franzia is a sub-drinkable wine that is still more than good enough to use in your food. In fact, just like for the spices I use, I actually prefer the mass market generic version of the thing, like capital C Cabernet Sauvignon or Chardonnay. Whatever that is, it's blended from a million producers and a million different vineyards, and I'm cool with it. I don't want to make shrimp scampi using the Chablis that I just spent $40 on, and ironically, I also don't want to make beef burgundy with nice burgundy. So just save yourself some money and spend $4 on Boda or Franzia and invest the difference in a nice wine to drink with that food. Anyways, those are just a few of the pantry items that I prefer to spend a little bit of extra money on, and a few that I think are not worth wasting your money on. Please let me know down in the comments what you guys think of these. What do you splurge on, and what do you think I got wrong here? As always, thank you so much for your time and attention. Thank you for sticking around to the end of the video, and we'll see you next time.